the third horseman, after you've done criticism and contempt, the emotional flooding really grows. The fight-flight syndrome happens. And when a person is in a chronic fight-flight syndrome, it's extremely destructive on the body. And sometimes it leads directly to physical problems, especially heart disease. It can lead to diabetes and so forth. And when a person gets down to the defensive place where it's automatically anything your partner says is taken in a defensive manner. It's just you can't really discuss anything anymore without your blood pressure going up, with the emotions flooding. And when you see this, you know the couple is really getting down pretty deep. Now, one of the questions I got earlier was, what can we do about that in the church? When you see people who are really this defensive and emotionally flooded, you probably need to refer them to a professional. Now, you can do a lot in terms of prevention of this and helping people maybe diagnose themselves. One of the best things you can do by having the psychoeducative programs going on in your church is you make people better clients. So they know where they are and they know better what they need. And as well as the staff and the leaders in the church, the elders know too. So instead of getting in over your head, you say, whoops, I think this is over my head and I need some help. Doesn't mean you don't pray with them or other things, but you don't try to do the counseling. The third horseman then is when people are getting into this defense mechanism, that automatically they'll do things like deny responsibility. That no matter what the partner says, we insist that we're not to blame. The devil made me do it, or the dog ate my homework, or something. Very defensive. And we all know how difficult it is to be around a person who denies responsibility. And you can see that all the time in TV and people around us. The second one is make excuses. Oh my gosh, the excuse-making people. I know that for some of us that's really, really difficult to handle. It is for me. I want to straighten people out rather than being patient and letting them come to their own conclusions. So I have an excuse. The third is a cross-complain. Now this is one that I see a lot in couple counseling. So a person may say, use an I statement, say, I would rather you did X, Y, Z, please do this for me. And they'll get a complaint, or it could be a criticism. And instead of taking that seriously, you say, well, you're worse than I am. It's the old thing of your mother wears combat boots type. You know, you attack right away. It's just, you're very squishy. You have these squishy spots all over you. Well, when you're living with an intimate enemy that's automatically defending and attacking, it is a mess. The emotions are very, very high. The next is, in defense mechanisms, disagree with a negative mind reading. Now this is one that's a little bit difficult, that I see it all the time, and sometimes when I'm counseling a couple and this happens, I call time out and say, you're practicing psychology without a license. Yeah, and one of the things that is amazing to me is that people come in and they want to tell me all about, they want to diagnose their husband or their wife, or to diagnose their kids. And I'll say, you know, you're not Dr. Freud. I don't diagnose people that way anyhow. But it seems like it's part of the lexicon now that we have so many people on Oprah, or everybody's trying to be Dr. Phil or something, and say, well, I'm reading your mind. This is what you're really saying and really thinking. I've heard that a lot on these people who come on and they're talking about politicians. Well, they wouldn't agree with anything. It's a negative mind reading. I know what you're really saying, and I try to get them to say, well, let's say it again. Have your husband say this again. And he says it, and she'll say, that's not what he really means. He really means this. This is what's going on in his heart. Well, you know, once a person thinks that he can read your mind and know what's really going on, he's out of touch with himself. I saw it on Oprah. Well, you know, you got a problem here, that you don't just take people for what they say. The last one is repeating yourself. Now, I would say this is a defense mechanism that I have a weakness for, just repeating myself. So if my wife or somebody doesn't understand what I'm saying or doesn't seem to agree, it's not just understand, it's agree, Back in the 70s in the Jesus movement and all the hippies, you know, they said, well, no, you don't understand, man. I say, I understand. I don't agree. You know, you can have disagreement. Disagreements are okay. It's a good thing to have disagreements. So we should repeat ourselves over and over, maybe louder. I said, you know, the way we talk to our kids, did you hear what I said? It isn't that they don't hear what you said, they don't agree. But when you're defensive, you use that as an attack. So it becomes another form of contempt and putting people down. And when that happens, man alive, it really is in a bad situation. Now this stonewalling is one that is a favorite with some people, especially men. Women can stonewall too, but tend not to stonewall. Men tend to withdraw into themselves. As a matter of fact, men tend not to be able to handle a discussion or an argument as well as women. Women are able to kind of multiply their emotions and attack real well. But men that kind of have this choice of, I either fight or flight. And fight doesn't mean verbally assault. For most men, it means another kind of fighting. So we're in a double bind. And that becomes really trouble. So a lot of times when a man feels his blood pressure going up and he's wanting to hit her, he's wanting to do something, which I don't recommend at all, it's a terrible thing, then you got to learn how to stop that. So what a man often does, or sometimes it's the woman, she will withdraw, and it's a, quote, stone wall. He becomes like a stone wall. Just withdraw from it. It's a callous cutoff. It is not helpful. It is not a good thing to do. Years ago, I had this person in my church, and he was a big, tall guy, great big guy, and his wife was a little bitty, tiny woman, and they were getting into some terrible fights. And he came in and he confessed his sin. I admit I pushed my wife. It's a terrible thing to do. It's awful. It's wrong. I should never have done that. She said, but you don't understand, Gary. My wife weighs 100 pounds wet, but she's got a 600-pound mouth. And he finally broke out of the stone wall. That's fight or flight. But most men will flight. They'll run. They'll get out of the house. They'll go someplace. And then, of course, if you have the woman that she's wanting to resolve this thing, she's coming after you, right? That's what I've got a whole seminar on maddening men and wild women, because the woman goes wild and the man's got to get out of there. And the more he withdraws, the more she wants to talk. Let's share this. Let's resolve this. Well, the guy is so emotionally upset and physically upset, he's not in any state to discuss things. In the book EQ by Daniel Goleman, which is a fantastic book, he tells this scene. He was going in a restaurant in New York, started to open the door, and this man came rushing out of the restaurant. And he came out and he stomped out. Before long, this beautiful young woman came right after him, screaming, shaking her fingers, saying, come back here, you no good blankety blank, and tell me you love me. Because that's what happens. This is called the dance of death. He's overwhelmed. He withdraws because he doesn't want to fight. And she comes after him, which makes him want to fight. So he's got to act like a stone wall. You have to learn how to teach people to stop the dance of death, make it a dance of life. Because people don't know this. Before marriage, very often it's the man is pursuing the woman, and afterwards he's pursuing something else, golf or basketball or work or preaching. I work with a lot of preachers, and they throw this thing up, you're going to stop my ministry for God. Well, that makes her feel real good right there, you know. And that's kind of a stonewall excuse. But the men tend to be more fragile. As a rule, men are much more emotionally fragile than women. As a rule. When I do my maddening men, wild women seminars and say this, I was in Singapore and I had 700 women, and I told women that, and they went, oh, Dr. Gary, you're crazy. My man is a stone wall. Yeah, because either he's a stone wall or he's out of control. And that's because he's trying to control something that's not easily controlled. Emotional flooding is very easy and common in men, and therefore that blood pressure rolls up, the brain waves, they're all like this because they're ready to fight. You know, 1,000 years ago, that's what a man did. He was out there protecting her, fighting dragons or whatever, you know, going on the crusades or something. Now, if you're in Iraq now, you can do that. But if you're at home living with somebody in a very small space and she's coming after you like this, what are you going to do? Now, some people, some men do beat their wives up, and that's a terrible, terrible thing to do. But we need to teach both the man and the woman how to break the cycle of death. The dance of death needs to become a dance of life. And my experience is just by teaching this to people, showing them what happens, they get a little bit more calmer, and in the next session, I will actually teach you more about this. This comes back to my comment that divorce is easy, separation is almost impossible. Why do you hear of so many people that have been divorced a year or 10 years or 20 years still fighting over something that doesn't amount to a hill of beans? It's because they're still reacting to each other emotionally. The major issue that causes so many fights in marriage isn't that people don't like each other, that they're not close enough, they're too close. You have to teach people how to have some distance and still stay intimate. But fighting keeps you very intimate. Intimate in the wrong way, but you're very reactive to what other people are doing. And we have to teach people how to be a little bit more separated and to be a little bit more calmer. Okay, so when you see these four horsemen occurring, I suggest you can teach people about this, but when you're involved with them, if they're involved with you at a time when they're emotionally flooded and fighting, they're probably over your head. Some of those people are almost too much for me, and I've been doing this a long, long time. It's very difficult to do. So you need to find a good couples therapist for them to work with. A good couples therapist, and maybe a support group, maybe your classes, your training, some anger management, renewing the mind. The skills that we're going to be teaching later will get more into that. Now, again, I'm just raising your awareness.